Thanks for joining us for Raceway Ministries today. In just a moment, we'll be sharing with you the latest in what's going on in the world of Christian ministry and outreach through the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. I'd like to welcome everybody to this edition of Raceway Ministries Today. Raceway Ministries Today is the podcast presentation of the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, and I'm Roger Marsh, the director of the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, and it's always a joy to be able to get on the program and be able to talk to people all over the country who are involved in doing ministry in motorsports in a variety of ways, and that's what our podcast is all about. If you need more information about the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, you can look us up on racewayministries.org, or you can follow our Facebook pages. We have 2 or 3 Facebook pages. You can go to the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, or you can find our Facebook page, Raceway Ministries at the Short Tracks, and then we have a new Facebook page that we're putting together to help things get started at Worldwide Technology Raceway over in St. Louis, and that page is called Gateway Racing Ministries. So good to have everybody listening tonight. It's our joy and my pleasure to be able to have a conversation with a young man named Travis Kahlstorf. Travis is a resident of Minnesota, way up there in the north, and he can correct me in a moment or two, but I think Minnesota is known as the land of 10,000 lakes. And then I also read something that said it's the North Star State or something to that effect. Travis can correct me in a moment or two on that if I'm wrong. But Travis also is host of the On the Track radio program, and you can catch it every Tuesday evening during race season. And I think race season is pretty much concluded up there in the Minnesota area, and I think he had his last broadcast for this season just a couple of weeks ago. But it's available through Northwoods Radio, and it comes through WKLK 96.5 Legends Rock. And you can go to Northwoods Radio website and find out all the details about that. But it's a fantastic program every Tuesday night during race season, and you might want to pick up on it. Travis is very, very familiar with the motorsports scene up there in the Minnesota, Wisconsin area. Some of the programs that I have heard on his Tuesday evening On the Track radio program have been interviews with all kinds of racers, promoters, track owners, chaplains, all kinds of people throughout the region up there. So my hat's off to him for his great work up there in that area. Travis has been a great friend of Raceway Ministries for several years, and I believe our first contact together was at a training event that we did for Raceway Ministries, and Travis happened to be attending that, and then we disconnected for several years, and then I came across him as he invited me to be a part of the On the Track radio program one night a couple of years ago. Now, that's all going by memory, Travis, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I just want to welcome you to our podcast this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, Roger, definitely my honor. Thank you so much for having me on. And yep, you're spot on there. The way that we met was definitely, no doubt about it, God was involved with it.
Yeah.
Back in 2011, and I was down in Tyler, Texas, at the White Lamb base there with Youth with a Mission, and I was going through one of their discipleship training schools. And while I was down there, I went there from January through May, and as I was there, I was checking out the local racetracks and seeing what was going on. I thought, as long as I'm down here, I might as well check these out. And with being from Minnesota, certainly a huge hockey fan, and I needed something to fill my void since hockey wasn't as readily accessible. I did go to Dallas for a couple games to go back to the North Star State. The Dallas Stars at one time were the Minnesota North Stars, and then they left to go down there, and now we have the Minnesota Wild up here.
Okay.
And then I'd also go over to Shreveport, Louisiana, to a couple of their Mudbug hockey games over there.
Okay.
But I was looking around for racetracks, and I saw knew about the Texas Motor Speedway, and I went on their website and saw that what your ministry there and saw that you had dates posted about a training session you had one weekend, and it worked for me to go over there, and that's how you and I met, was in the media center there at the Texas Motor Speedway.
That's right. It was at the media center.
And then I was able to help out a few weeks later at the dirt track at the Texas Motor Speedway.
Yes.
So I had a great time helping out with ministry there, and my mom had actually flown down for my birthday week in March, and so she and I both went and just had a phenomenal time doing that.
Wow.
You mentioned the 10,000 lakes. Up here we call them the 10,000 hockey rinks.
I guess coming up on this winter time, it does turn into hockey rinks during the winter time. Yeah.
So we're huge hockey fans up here, especially with the University of Minnesota Duluth hockey program.
That's awesome. Wow. Well, thank you so much for your friendship. I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you do to promote not only just racing, but also ministry at the racetracks up there in the Minnesota-Wisconsin area. You do a phenomenal job, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you and to have you as one of our friends and partners in ministry. I thought we might begin with just a description of your radio program. I've already mentioned a little bit about it, but I want to make sure that our listeners have all the information they need so that they can be prepared to tune in the future. And one of the reasons I mention that and want to begin with that is because I think your program is rather unique. I don't know of any other major radio station that I've listened to that takes time out and devotes a whole evening to a call-in, interview, podcast type program live that has to do with racing. And so tell us a little bit about the program itself and make sure our listeners understand what you do and what you accomplish with that.
Sure. I'm going into my 7th year here with working with the radio station. It's just a part-time gig that I have. I broadcast high school sports throughout the fall and winter and spring. And when I started a little over 6 years ago, we're nearing the springtime, and God just laid it on my heart and said, you know what, we don't have a racing show around northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin area. There used to be one years ago out of Duluth. Duluth is about 15 minutes from where I live here, and we're 20 minutes from downtown Duluth. But that show hadn't been on in years. And I thought, what about having this show? So I talked to our station's general manager, Kerry Rod, and I approached him, and I said, Kerry, what do you think about having a racing show? And he said, well, type up what the show would be about. And I said, okay. So I typed up, my goal was to have drivers, crew members, officials, track promoters, anyone involved with racing, and it didn't matter if it was mostly in our local area, but it didn't matter if it was here. And it ranges from, I have guests on that just race once a year in the local fair races that we have here in Carleton County, up through NASCAR. Had David Stremme on, had Jason Line from NHRA. He grew up just about a half hour west of here, actually in Cromwell, Minnesota. So people like that had Bobby Pierce, Devin Moran from the World of Outlaw Late Model Series on.
Yeah.
Rick Eshelman, the announcer who just passed away here about a few weeks ago.
Right.
So just different calibers, and the whole goal is to talk about what's going on at our tracks. And I thought, it'd be neat to be able to talk about the point series, what's going on with that, and as well as future events. And throughout the years, I've gone away from talking about the weekly point standings to let's get to know you as an individual.
Yeah,
and it's just been phenomenal having people on, no matter what caliber they are. This year, I had 2 weeks in a row of where we focused on the kids of the local drivers who are racing go-karts. And
listen, I listened to that, and it was phenomenal. I mean, these kids were just unbelievable in what they know about racing and their passion for the sport. And your interviews with them were absolutely terrific.
Oh, well, thank you. It was fun because I went in and I feel like this is my first show again, because I don't know how well the kids were going to speak, and just are they going to be real shy outgoing, and certainly hoping that the parents would be nearby if need be. I think the ones that you listen to, in particular, the Kotzshades out near the Twin Cities area, were phenomenal, and just how outspoken they were about their faith.
Oh, they were. They could have their own show. I mean, they were great. They were terrific.
The oldest 16 years old races a late model at Elko Speedway. The middle one is 13, and he races Miata up in Brainerd here. And then the youngest one races the Bandoleros, and I think he was 7. And definitely kudos to those parents for what they do. And then we had some of the other ones, and some were a little more shy. talking about go-kart racing, and there's one in particular, Blake Adams out of Cameron, Wisconsin, which is about 2 hours south of here.
Yes.
And, his dad raced. He has over 500 feature wins in modifieds and late models and different stuff. And his grandpas have raced. His grandpa owns a racetrack in Rice Lake, Wisconsin. And his uncle is Rodney Sanders, modified and late model driver who tours a lot with the USMTS out of Texas. And, just a huge racing family there. But it's just so much fun for myself to get these people who, many of them whom I've watched growing up as a race fan, getting to know them and just hearing their stories about how did they get into racing and what are their goals that they have, what are their big accomplishments and just different things. And as we're all involved in racing, each person has a story to tell, and they don't always have the time to tell it.
Well, you're really right, and you provide a great platform for them to be able to do that, and it adds such a tremendous dimension, because normally when we think about racing, we think about a car, and we think about a guy with a helmet sitting in there, and we think about a guy hoisting a trophy in victory lane, and we never get to know the people personally, even the promoters and the other people involved in the sport. And to hear your conversations with them and to delve into their personal lives provides such an insight into the people of the sport. And I'm sure you're a lot like most of us who are involved in the sport. We learn pretty quickly that even though the sport itself is exciting and very attractive because of the excitement that it generates, it's the people in the sport that we get to know and we come to appreciate. And I learned this a long time ago when I began to go to the Racing Promotion Monthly RPM meetings a few years ago. Stuart Doty invited me to come and be a part of their meetings, and so I began to set up display tables in their exhibitions and then attend their general sessions and just get to know the people. And I discovered through that it's the people that you get to know and appreciate, and when you do learn their stories, it adds a whole different facet to the sport, and your program provides such a great platform for that. And so I commend you for that, and I don't want our listeners to overlook the opportunity to be involved in listening to your program on Tuesday evenings. Now, I'm assuming it'll crank back up maybe sometime in the spring?
Yes, we start typically around the middle of June, and the reason we start that late is because our radio station, we have 3 radio stations that we have.
Okay.
The one that we have the show on, we cover the local high school sports. We're doing all 3, but mostly on that one. And we have the baseball and softball state tournament that goes through the 2nd, 3rd week of June. So we have to wait until the state tournament is done so then we can start our show so it doesn't interfere with the tournament broadcast.
Gotcha.
But otherwise, racing up here starts around the 1st week of April. And this weekend coming up is actually the last weekend of racing up here. That'll end.
Oh, okay. Okay.
One other thing with the show is I wanted a platform for Chaplain to be able to come on and talk about their ministry, because one thing I've noticed is when I go up and I introduce myself to someone, they either A, don't know that the track has a chaplain, or B, they've heard me, but they don't know who I am, what I do, anything like that, where this way it allows chaplains to come on and share their testimony, share their ministry, what they have going on, so that fans and drivers, everyone else gets to know us as well. And I think that's huge.
Yes.
And that's one thing that's neat about this radio station, this 3 that we work for, is up until about 7 years ago, it was privately owned, but our local Indian reservation here bought them out, and the show is on a classic rock station, and yet here you have people share their testimony. If there's someone that we know that's at the hospital, I pray for them, and I'm able to do that with the local sports as well. I'll pray for someone and that kind of thing, and no one has complained or anything, and it's just been an amazing thing.
That is pretty amazing, and it's a great opportunity that God has opened up, and I can tell in your discussions with people on the interviews that you have that there is no hindrance and no restrictions, and it's not unusual at all to hear you and another person that you're interviewing talk about God and your relationship with the Lord and spiritual needs and those sort of things. So what a great opportunity you have. Man, I'm blessed just to be on the receiving end of the blessing that God has put in your lap. What a great, great thing. Now, that kind of leads me to our next question, because even though our conversation obviously is going to be around Raceway Ministries and your part in it, I would like to start by just getting you to describe for us how your walk with the Lord began. What's your spiritual background? How did your walk with the Lord start? And then if you want to go ahead and follow up with that, how did you get involved in ministry in motorsports?
Well, I grew up in a Christian family. My parents went to church. In fact, the way that they met, my dad grew up the North Shore of Lake Superior, and my mom spent most of her life up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Okay.
And she moved over to Duluth after her junior year of high school. And my dad's mom was the pianist at the church.
Okay.
And my mom's family started to go to that church, North Shore Baptist, and my grandma Dagmar was the organist. And
wow.
so they became very good friends, and through that, that's how Dad and Mom met, and that took place. And so growing up in the church and different functions there, and I don't know if you had the broadcast down in Texas there, but up around here we had what's called the Children's Bible Hour with Uncle Charlie out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And they would tour with the kids and do their shows at different churches and things. They came to town when I was 6 years old, and after my mom and I had gone, I got home, and I said, you know what, I'd like to accept the Lord. So we prayed together, and then after that, I remember how excited my parents were for that.
Yeah.
And they said that the next time we were at church, they made sure that I told our pastor the decision I made. And, I knew then that it was certainly a big thing.
Yeah.
Well, continued on in church and things, and as a teenager, well, I certainly had my time where I fell away from God. I was still involved in youth group and things, and I definitely had the church front and had the church answers and Sunday school answers, sometimes we say.
Oh, yeah.
Do all that, but I definitely certainly wasn't walking that way. But I was able to get involved as a youth group leader at our church, and my brother, who was 6 years younger than me, he was in the youth group, and I was his leader. And it was such a neat time, and I just really felt that God wanted me to be involved there, and that he was going to use my brother, as a tool to keep me closer to God.
Yeah, sure.
And, oddly enough, there was a year where I was driving home, and I just felt this feeling that my brother was going to die.
Really?
And I'm like, well, this is an odd feeling, and I was greatly disturbed by it, because I'm like, well, who has this thought? Why am I thinking this, and what have you? And so I just tried to shake it off, and every once in a while that feeling would come back, and so I tried to do everything I could with him. And we were very good friends. We went to college together, and we ended up staying in the same dorm and everything at the Oak Hills Christian College out west of here. And in the summer of 2007, he was killed in a motorcycle accident.
Really?
And I'm like, oh, man, this is why God wanted me to go to school so we could spend that extra time, because it was in the summer after our first semester at college together. And I had quit a good paying job to go there and different things. It just didn't make sense to me while I was supposed to be there.
Sure.
Well, at that time, I wasn't exactly walking with God either. I was kind of going along. And at that time, I knew God told me, he said, you need to make a decision. You are either going to follow me or you need to follow Satan. You can't be sitting on the fence here trying to follow both of us.
Right.
And it was through my brother's death that I realized, okay, I really need to choose what I'm going to do. And by the grace of God, I said, okay, I got to follow you, Christ. And through that, like I said, I was a youth group leader, went back more with the Lord. We have a friend, Steve Schreier, who our family grew up with at North Shore Baptist. Mm-hmm. And he was the head chaplain for our area here, and he knew I was a youth group leader, and he asked, what do you think about becoming a chaplain at the racetracks? Well, my parents took me to the races when I was just a few months old, and I always say that I was hooked ever since the first time I was there. But throughout racing, going throughout the years as a kid, I just loved it and was fascinated by it.
Yeah,
and I didn't know any drivers, I didn't know anyone involved, I just went as a fan. And I would go by myself and just sit there and just listen to the old-timers talk. And just hear what they would say about someone. Yeah, I just loved it. So then when Steve asked me to be a chaplain, I'm like, well, yeah. It just seemed like a great fit, and I wanted to get involved. And I had another friend who did know a driver, Daryl Nelson, who races late models and modifying. And he said, Daryl's open to having you on as a crew member if you'd like. And so I went and I did that for a while, and got that perspective of things.
Wow.
And, then I decided, I'm paying more to be in the pits than I am to sit in the grandstands. I'm only watching the races that he's in. I'd rather go back to the grandstands.
Yeah.
But it was through those encounters there where being a chaplain has really been a good fit for me.
Yeah.
I tell my wife, Sheila, where I say, I've never been a racer. Yeah, I was on a pit crew for a little bit, but that was it. And I officiated for 10 years at different racetracks up here. But I said, I'm not a racer. But yet the race teams, they welcome me. They make me feel part of their family, part of their team. And it's just been an amazing avenue, and it's just neat to see how God is in the ministry up here that we have.
Well, I can see how God was working all along to prepare you for that. I mean, how many 6-year-olds get hooked on racing? I mean, so it's been a part of your upbringing, essentially, just being around racing and the opportunity to even sit and listen to the old timers. What an opportunity to get a feel for the sport and to become integrated in terms of relationships and just learning the sport, what makes it work and what makes it tick. I mean, God was just opening up opportunities for you to sort of meld into the sport. Then even the tragedy with your brother, I know that had to have been a heartbreaking time for you and a challenging time for you. But, it's in the midst of those sort of experiences that God teaches us things that we would not learn otherwise. And when we go through those things, we have a unique ability to empathize with others who go through experiences like that. So I think even in that, God was preparing you for maybe even being able to encounter tragedies and dilemmas and challenges that racers and their families come across. So I can see how God was preparing you for that all along. And it just seems like a natural fit. When God says, I think you need to walk a little bit deeper with me, I don't know about you, but the first thing I do is say, okay, what does that look like and where is that going to be? And then when God opens up the door of opportunity and you begin to jump into it and begin to fit into it, it begins to feel like a hand in a warm glove, And so I can see how God was working all along to get you ready for all the things that He's given you to do, even the radio program. I mean, goodness, through your experiences, you have such a depth of understanding of the racing industry and the racing people. What better person to dialogue with them and to be able to understand their issues? Pretty fascinating stuff, Travis. Man, I'm impressed. I'm just impressed with what God is doing in your life. It's really incredible and awesome. I'm so thankful that He got a hold of a person like you and raised you up to do what you do in the midst of motorsports there in the Minnesota-Wisconsin area. It's awesome. Well, I know that there's lots of racing up there in that area. I learned a long time ago, especially when I was attending the RPM meetings with Stuart Doty, I didn't realize that there was so much racing in Wisconsin and Minnesota, but the place is just loaded with it. What I'd like for you to do is sort of describe what it looks like up there, the expanse of the racing, talk about the scope of ministry in the midst of racing there, and then talk about the ministry needs in the region too. I'm not sure all of our listeners, especially down here in the South, understand how big racing is up there in that area. So talk about how big it is and then talk about any ministry that's going on there and then what are the needs.
A 2.5-hour radius from our Duluth area here, we have 13 racetracks that go out to the northern tips of Wisconsin, over to Brainerd area, which is just 2.5 hours southeast of where we are, down to the Twin Cities, and then you go a little bit further if you make that race a little bigger, say 5 hours out, you have tracks up in Ontario, Canada.
Okay.
On any given Friday night, we'll have at least 25 race teams that come out of Thunder Bay, Ontario, and it's about a 4-hour drive for them. Imagine crossing the border with their haulers, getting off work on Friday to get down to Superior, Wisconsin, and then with them comes 300 to 400 Canadians out of Thunder Bay that are fans.
Really?
And it's just incredible. The crowd that comes down follows the Thunder Bay. They had a racetrack up there and they closed, I want to say, probably about 15 years ago or so.
Okay.
And then they just opened up a brand new racetrack this year up there at Thunder City Speedway. They race on Wednesday nights, and traditionally they've always raced on Wednesday nights so that in case it rained, then they could race again on Thursday night because drivers come from such a vast expanse with Canada. It's quite a ways to get there. So those drivers will start on Wednesday night. Then there's one driver in particular, David Simpson, who would start Wednesday night, then Thursday night, he would make the trip over, which is about a 6-hour drive over to Grand Rapids, Minnesota, to race Thursday night there, then go to Superior on Friday, then go to either Hibbing or Ashland on Saturday, Proctor on Sunday, and then get home late Sunday night. So 5 nights of racing.
Man, these guys are serious about it. Wow.
And our driver, so he's one who is really, trying to get the shows in, going for that points championship. The other drivers, though, they are putting in, quite a few are putting in 4 nights a week easily in that they get, and this is just like anywhere, it's their weekend hobby that they have, and just all having fun. But what we do at the racetracks is, for myself, I'll go into the track. I try to get there 2.5 hours ahead of time, and try to get there when teams are rolling in. Walk through the pits, introduce myself to people that I haven't met before. There's race teams that I know that want to meet for prayer, people that want to talk. Some tracks have us give a prayer at the driver's meeting. Definitely always give an invocation beforehand. And then it kind of depends on the night, on how the Holy Spirit is leading.
Right.
Sometimes I'll go back to the pits if I know people want to talk some more, if I know someone says they had something going on, or people that I didn't get a chance to pray with. And then other times I'll sit in the grandstands, talk with people, get to know people up in the stands, watch the races. One thing, Roger, that I found has been huge with ministry at the tracks is watching the races.
Okay.
Because one thing I found is people who hear a chaplain think that I know nothing about their sport, not realizing that I've been watching since I was a little kid on a race team, different things than official. And so I have to prove to them that I'm not here just to preach to you. I'm here because I have a passion myself. I do understand your sport. And when I can sit there and see that a person had a flat tire, or someone won a race, or anything that's gone on, and then go to the pits afterwards and go through and talk to them and say, man, that was a bum deal there with your tire, or, you had a bad wreck. Congratulations on your win. Stuff like that, that means so much to them.
Yeah.
And also traveling to the different track where the ministry really started to open up was when drivers would see me several hours away from a track where they normally would see me. And they'd ask, what are you doing here? Well, I'm here to serve you. I'm here for the ministry. And that also really opened things because they saw this guy, he's not just around as a stranger. He's here because he cares about us.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's a lot of what we do at the track. We have a church who wants to be involved next summer at the track in Superior at the Gondakla Speedway, who want to host a breakfast Saturday mornings because so many, as I mentioned, so many of the Canadians and other fans spend the night there before they branch off to the Saturday night tracks and have a ministry serving breakfast to them.
Well, that's awesome. Wow.
And to be there. And then I do hospital visitations, weddings. I have a funeral coming up on Saturday. We do church services in the pits for some multi-day events. But all the tracks up here are extremely open to us coming in. Tracks call begging to have a chaplain show up at their events, and there's basically 3 of us here, and we just cannot cover all of the events that we have. In Minnesota here, we have 36 tracks that range from go-karts to 3/8 and half-mile dirt, clay, asphalt. Of course, we have the drag strip and BIR. Motocross and snowcross are also huge up here for the ice races that go on.
Sure.
And then 48 tracks around Wisconsin in the area there.
Wow.
One of my guests was interesting. Mike Klippenstein, he's originally from Canada, and he moved down here because the oil refinery in Superior, Wisconsin had an explosion a few years ago, and he's here heading up the whole rebuilding process. But he was on the show this year. He races modifieds, motocross, snowcross, and jet skis.
You're kidding.
And
wow.
so I asked him, I go, where's your favorite place in the whole world to race? Because he's talking about traveling, and his answer was Dubai. And
wow.
Well, this is interesting, He said, they treat us like royalty over there, and this kind of thing. But, so we have racers that, not just your stock car, but also, like I said, go-karts, motocross that we're involved with. And jet skis and things you don't think about northern Minnesota, but, we just run the whole gamut, and the whole thing is to just be there for them.
It blows me away with what you said, with all of the racing that goes on, not just the dirt tracks, but all the other stuff that goes on. I mean, the snow racing and those kind of things are so foreign to us down here in the South, but you've got opportunities for motorsports competition up there year-round, and even just the auto racing part of it, all those tracks and all those venues up there that are wide open to having chaplains come, and you only have 3 of you to service all of those venues as chaplains. That just boggles my mind. Obviously, the need is great. I don't even know how to ask the question. Where can we start to begin to multiply you and the others that work with you? I appreciate the church that's going to do the breakfast, of course. That's obviously a step in the right direction. But where can we start to begin to see God raise up chaplains to expand the work of ministry up there in the midst of all that racing?
First of all, prayer.
Yeah.
Prayer that God will lead us, be sensitive to who He wants us to talk to, who to share with, that the individuals that we speak will be having a desire
right,
and a heart for ministering to people. One thing I found here is it is a very dark area around here. God is something that people are open to, but yet not many receive, and they're a hard group of people to reach. One thing that I noticed in Texas, and also traveling through Arizona, that is you wander around or you talk to someone, and it's like, oh yeah, I attend this church, I go here, what have you. Up here, it's fewer and fewer people.
Right.
And trying to get a church involved, even to be able to go in and speak to a church to say, here's the ministry, it's almost impossible at times.
My goodness, wow.
And the pastor will say, well, I don't have time to do that. And I say, and I have made it very clear to them when I first approached them on it, I said, I am not asking you, because I know you're busy, and if God is leading you this direction, of course, have at it.
Sure.
But I'm just looking for someone in your church. And I talked to a church up on what we call the Iron Range up here, because we have iron ore mines north of us. And I said, sir, can I come in? I said, you have the Hibbing Raceway right in your town here. Can I come in and speak at your church? And he said, no, I am so discouraged here because the men in my church don't even want to help out here with ministry and help at the church.
Wow.
And my heart was going out to him, because here's a pastor, obviously frustrated and can't get help there. But second of all, I'm thinking to myself, you're saying no for these people. Mm-hmm. Let them be the ones to say no, and maybe the ministry at the track will rekindle that fire, and they'll say, you know what, we need to get more involved in our church so that the racers and people will have a place to go to on a Sunday, go to for when they need help. We just, just trying to convince people there's a need. Can you help us? It's honestly just a struggle. Sometimes just trying to even do that.
Yeah. Prayer is powerful, and probably the place to start, as you indicated, would be to mobilize our people to make it a constant point of prayer, to lift you guys up and to lift that whole area up to the Lord in prayer. And, many of us down here in the South, and you hit the nail on the head, down here in the South, we're spoiled in a sense. There's churches all around, and everybody typically is involved in some kind of church or has been in their lifetime. And many churches are very open to getting involved in ministry outside the walls of the church building, And we forget that there are places here in the United States where that's not the case. The least that we can do is pray. The other thing we ought to be able to do is go. And if any of the churches up in your area would need encouragement, or if you needed assistance in the way of training other people, I should be able to just pick up and go. I mean, I do that in other places. We do it year-round on the NASCAR circuit. We have Raceway Ministry teams all over the country, and it's not unusual for me to make trips and go and organize groups and train them and get them ready to go at the venue that's there in their city and so forth. But we need to concentrate more on these areas where there isn't as much work going on. And I just commend you, Travis, for your courage and your boldness and your enthusiasm and your passion. That has to be a hard thing to face week in, week out, month in and month out, to just want so badly to have chaplain work going on at these raceways, and you can't find people to go out and do it. So offer you my apologies for not being the prayer warrior that I should be. And I need to encourage all of our people around the country to lift you guys up in prayer, that doors will begin to open and hearts will be softened. Sounds like the ministry needs are overwhelming up there in that area.
It certainly feels that way, and I know how it is, Roger. It's like, boy, I think to myself, like, boy, why wasn't I praying for that person? It's just how it is. God leads you in how you need to pray. My prayer this year is that God will open more hearts. We have a gentleman who is a pastor, and he works for the local Komatsu dealer as a mechanic there for the heavy equipment for the mines. But he's also a pastor of this church. Well, he came on board helping us out this year, and that's been such a blessing to have him up there. And he's been involved with racing and part of a racing family, and so people know him. And so that was one encouraging thing this year that we had, was David coming on board with us.
Yeah. Oh, man, what an encouragement that must be, for sure. Well, let me suggest this. If you come across any churches up there in that area, either in the city or out in the small towns, and if it would be any help or assistance at all, I would be happy to send a letter to them and let them know that Raceway Ministries is something that takes place nationwide, and it's a great opportunity to plug their people into serving the Lord and getting outside the church walls and making a difference out there in the culture. I don't know if it would be of encouragement to them or make any difference or not, but if you come across any pastors that maybe need to be encouraged by someone other than just you as the local guy, let me know. I'd be happy to give them a call or write them a letter or do anything I can. And then obviously, like I said, if there's anything I could do by coming up there in person to offer any assistance or encouragement, I'd be more than willing and happy to do that as well. But the main thing I think at this point is to challenge all of our people in Raceway Ministries work, and those who might be listening to the podcast, let me encourage you, please pray for the work up there in Wisconsin, Minnesota. 3 guys out there, busting it to get out there and try to reach all the motorsports activity that's going on up there. That's a challenge. That is a challenge. And so we need to pray about that. Wow. Well, thanks for painting the picture. It's pretty clear. Sounds like you have some great opportunities and are doing a lot of things to make the most of the opportunities that you have up there, Travis. But the ministry needs are really, really great up there in that area. Man. Well, listen, all the conversations that you have had with your radio program on the track, the ones I've listened to with all the racers and chaplains and promoters, track owners, to me, that along with what you've already shared about your involvement in racing around your region, tells me that you have plenty of experience with that. We all learn from each other, and I think if you, with your unique experience, probably have learned some things about serving as a chaplain at a short track or with a racing series or whatever the case may be, you've learned some things that I think would be a benefit to others who are either thinking about getting into the sport or they're just now getting started as a chaplain, or maybe they've been doing it for a long time. What are some insights, pieces of advice, tips that you have learned?
Oh, boy. I remember my first year as a chaplain. One thing that's interesting, just real quick here, going back a little bit also with my broadcasting history, is throughout high school, throughout most of my life, I've been shy. And I hated getting up in front of people, hated having to get up and give a speech in class and all that kind of stuff.
Really?
Okay. And that's where, when I became a youth leader, it forced me to speak, to get up in front and hold a Bible study, different things like that. And my grandpa was in ham radio, and that's how I got my interest in radios, and I got my ham license.
Okay.
And he was a huge Rush Limbaugh fan, and I thought, I want to be the next Rush Limbaugh.
Okay.
And so that's,
okay.
And also, when I would watch my dad play basketball with his church group, I would sit there by myself, and I would do play-by-play myself, watching them play. And I thought, this would be kind of fun to do.
Really?
And,
okay.
So when I started with the ministry, I'm like, okay, it's one thing to sit there and talk to these people about their cars and stuff like that, but how do I talk to them about God? That to me was totally different because, well, sure, it's easy. Oh, nice car. What, tell me about it. Where, okay, let's talk about God. Would you like to pray and all this kind of thing? And I remember there was one driver in particular, Tom Nesbitt, who raced for over 50 years out of Thunder Bay. He's in the National Dirt Track Hall of Fame, and found out here a few years ago that I'm actually distantly related to him. But he was one where I really wanted to ask him if he wanted to pray. And a good friend of mine, actually he's the one whose sister's funeral I'm doing on Saturday, he was with me at the Cedar Lake Speedway.
Okay.
And I go, man, I'd sure like to go up and ask Tom to pray, but I don't know how to do it. And Rick turned to me and says, well, why don't you just go up and ask him? So sheepish little me, I go over there and ask Tom, would you like to pray? And he turned me down rather bluntly in his Canadian way, and so I thought, oh boy. So it was kind of discouraging, but then I got to the point where I realized, what? They're not turning me down. They're turning God down, which gave me a much greater passion for what am I doing here? And how can I make them see God in a different light than what they're seeing him as? So through that, I go out and I really force myself sometimes. When I mentioned I go out and talk to new drivers, new teams, because it's not always easy to just go up to someone stranger. But it's like, okay, on those days where I have to, boom, that's where I know I'm really getting pushed to do it. Encourage yourself to get out and just reach out to someone who you don't know.
Good.
Definitely take time for those that you do know. And sometimes they're more uncomfortable to talk to because, well, they're my buddy and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there again, force yourself to do it. When you're sitting in the grandstands, don't allow yourself to get secluded. Don't allow yourself to find your comfy little spot where you always sit and not talk to anyone. Reach out and talk to those around, which again can be uncomfortable, but why are you there? You're there to reach out to those around.
That's a great point. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Whenever I get to the track, I park in the parking lot and I pray. I say, God, lead me to those that you want me to talk to. He doesn't call us to reach out to everyone, just those that he puts in front of us. And okay, who do you have for me tonight? And just see where the Holy Spirit leads you.
Yeah.
And take your past experiences, like what you talked about with my life. Take your past experiences. God has formed you up to this point for a reason.
Sure.
And if, as difficult or as easy as it may be, use those times to reach out to someone else.
Yeah.
And it may cause yourself to break down or what have you, but hey, we're all human.
Yeah.
God is working through us. That's part of it.
Yeah. Boy, you're so right. You know, my wife has been a great partner with me in ministry as a pastor through the years. And so many times she's been by my side whenever I've had to console people or pray with people or meet them in the middle of a challenge and encourage them and so forth. And one of the phrases that she always says to them, and I didn't understand it at first whenever she began to use this phrase, but she always says, God doesn't waste our pain. And the thing that I've come to learn from that phrase is when we do go through hard times, it's amazing that God will bring across our pathway people that are going through that very same thing. And so the pain that we have experienced in the past, God doesn't waste it, but he wants us to use the pain that we've experienced to help somebody else go through the same pain. So, you know, you're exactly right. You never know who God is going to bring across your path, and you best be ready, because God may bring someone across your path who is going through something that you've been through before, and you're the exact person that God needs to minister to the needs of that person. So I love the idea that you pray before you even enter the speedway and just ask for God's leadership. Boy, that's the primary thing right there.
With my life verse, my name is Travis. It's Traveler for the Lord. Proverbs 2, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. And I look at my life and I think, wow, you know, my life verse and what my name means has been so much of what my life has been about. I remember when I was in Texas there, and I was traveling to, I believe it was the Lone Star Speedway.
Yeah.
I remember God putting in my heart a vision of one day I'm going to be traveling, serving him as a chaplain.
Wow.
And I was already a chaplain at that time, but more of a full-time kind of a deal.
Yeah.
And next year will be my third year, but I'm the official chaplain of the Northern Renegade Sprint Car Series.
Wow.
And the way I got involved with that is the owner and founder of that series, he used to race modifieds and late models, and I got to know him through just ministry in the pits. And when he started it, he called me up and he wanted to get together, and he knew me, he got to know me. And he said, you know, I would like you to be our series chaplain. And he said that to him, the chaplain is the most important person on the staff because he wants God to be the focus. So I was the official first hiree of the Northern Renegades, and by God's grace, they cover my expenses when I travel with them and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Boy, what a great opportunity. My goodness.
But it also taught me the importance of being true to God, following him, making sure my life is right, because I hate to say it this way, but I'm getting paid to be their chaplain, to lead them in Christ. And if I am not doing that the right way myself, if I am not diving into the Bible, to the Word, time in prayer, seeking his will, how can I go and minister to them? And tell them, yep, you need to do this, you need to do that, make sure you're in a church, but I'm not going to church myself, but you do that. You know, I can't do that.
No. Well, I think God expects integrity on our part. Everything that we preach and everything that we share, we need to make sure it's going on in our own lives. You hit the nail on the head there. That's exactly right.
Boy, you know, I certainly have fallen and had my my bad days like anyone else. And
we all do.
It's like, boy, it's a good thing I'm living with a car here today. But God certainly knows what's going on anyhow.
Well, by his grace, he uses us. And I often say this, if I were God, I would have given up on me a long time ago. But God is such a God of grace. You know, I just am so thankful that he chooses to use us in spite of what we are.
Oh, amen.
Well, Travis, listen, I'm so excited about what God has going on with you out there in that area. Man, our prayers are going to be with you as you continue to serve him faithfully and seek those opportunities to be able to share Christ with the people up there in the motorsports world where you are. What are your plans for the future? You mentioned ice skating and hockey up there in those 10,000 lakes up there. I'm sure the lakes are going to be frozen over here in a few weeks. You're going to be out there ice skating and playing hockey during the winter time. What do you do for the off season, and what do you got planned for 2023?
Well, during the off season, I am very busy with broadcasting high school sports for our 3 radio stations.
Yeah, okay.
I'm also the public address announcer for the Carlton School District, so I cover all their basketball, volleyball, football games.
Okay.
My wife teaches first grade here in town. We have a 9-year-old who's a 3rd grader, and we also have a 26-year-old son, so we're busy with stuff there.
Oh, yeah.
And here's one thing that's turned into a ministry blessing is for, I don't know how many years, 16 years or whatever now, I've had season tickets to the UMD men's hockey team here in Duluth.
Oh, yeah.
And I would start going with our associate pastor, and I've just kept the season tickets myself. And so my dad goes with me Friday night, and then Saturday for our 3 seats, either my wife and one of our sons go, or I take some friends.
Yeah.
But one thing that's neat, Roger, is around here, 99% of people are hockey fans.
Yeah.
And it allows me to call up a driver and say, hey, how would you like to go to this UMD game this weekend?
Oh, man. Wow.
And as we're sitting there, it's a ministry tool and a very non-threatening environment to be able to just talk to them.
Absolutely.
Get to know them even more and deeper in a time where we're both just having a blast.
Yeah.
And that's just one thing that we do with the hockey tickets is let's use this as a ministry to those.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
It's also our way to get out and just enjoy for ourselves, no doubt about that.
Sure.
Talking about the weather a little bit, it's supposed to be 65 up here come Sunday. Yesterday morning, it was 18 degrees.
Ooh.
And a guy on a motorcycle to go by at the stop sign yesterday morning was 18 degrees.
Oh, ouch.
Truly the diehards.
Wow.
As far as the ministry goes, just trying to reach out more with trying to get into churches and find people that we can get involved and planning ministry for next year with the needs that we'll have coming up. And then hitting the track banquets. There are award banquets coming up, going to do those as well.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Boy, the work never ends, does it?
No.
Always something going on.
Wow. Definitely not.
Well, I'm so grateful that you have enough passion for ministry and motorsports to have your eyes open for all those opportunities. It'd be so easy to come to the end of the season and just kind of kick back and say, well, it'll all crank up again next April, so I'll worry about it then. But it sounds like your heart is 100% into it, and looks like God's opened up plenty of opportunities for you to be able to share Christ with your motorsports friends and all the people He's given you to minister to year-round. So fantastic. Any final thoughts that you might have, Travis, for those who might be listening today?
I would just say one thing that I really appreciate you, Roger, is that you have reached out to me. And there's times where I feel like my own little island, and the importance of having a group of people behind you, supporting you, encouraging you, saying, hey, Trav, you need to knock that off. Whatever the situation may be, but just knowing that we're not alone in this ministry.
Yeah.
And just get involved in a church, get involved in friends who will hold you accountable and who will be there for you is huge. Believers, and I also feel non-believers, because we need to be reaching out to them.
Yes.
I tell people, like when I'm in the pit, and I talk to a lot of them, they don't go to church because, well, they're too busy, which I totally understand. I'm like, yeah, you're okay, that's races.
Oh, yeah.
Which still isn't an excuse not to be at church. But here's where church comes in.
Yeah.
Church is like your pit crew. Your pit crew is there to help you work on the car. You want to do the best that you can. You bounce questions off each other because you're coming from the same background. Where church is, we're there as sinners. We're there to grow. We're there to encourage. We're there to be strengthened, to walk in our faith. When we have questions, we can bounce them off each other. Church doesn't save us. It's by God's grace that we're saved. But church is there to help us grow.
Yeah.
And, get involved in a church.
Couldn't say it better. I love the local church. I've been a part of the local church all my life, either as a part of a youth group when I was younger, and then, of course, serving in pastoral ministry, and even in the role of directing Raceway Ministries work. I love being connected to the local church. I can't imagine not being connected to it. And you're so right. We need each other. We need to pray for each other. We need to encourage. I love your illustration. The church is our pit crew. It really is. It really is. And all the different people with their different spiritual gifts encourage in different ways. I can't imagine life without church. So, man, great advice, great thoughts. Well, Travis, thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for what you do. I praise God for the giftedness that He has bestowed upon you to open the doors of opportunity that you have through broadcasting and through all of your involvement in high school sports and out there in the motorsports world. I just thank God for you. You're really a blessing. And for our listeners, let me just remind us that we're talking today to Travis Kahlstorf. Travis is way up there in Minnesota, has a radio program called On the Track that goes during race season on Tuesday nights. All kinds of interviews with all kinds of people. Be sure and tune into it through Northwoods Radio when it cranks up next year. And Travis works as a chaplain for series. He's done chaplain work at tracks all around the Wisconsin area and very, very much involved with us in Raceway Ministries up in his neck of the woods. So, Travis, thank you so very much. If people wanted to get in touch with you to offer some assistance or help, or just to tap into your experience as a Raceway chaplain, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
They can reach me at my phone number at 218-590-4616. That's 218-590-4616. Also can send me an email at t_KAHLSTORF@yahoo.com. And then on Facebook, you can look me up on there. And also, our new this year, I am not a techie guy at all, Roger.
Okay.
But the radio station gave me a Facebook page.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
For the radio show.
Yeah.
So on the Track Radio Show Facebook page, so I try to remember to go over and check that once in a while.
Yeah.
And do that. But definitely texting or call is for sure the best way to get a hold of me, or an email, and the best way to contact me with anything they may need. All
right. Well, fantastic. Well, Travis, again, thank you for your time. Appreciate you so much, your experience in Raceway Ministries with us, and just appreciate your friendship a lot. Any final words?
All I have to say is thank you for what you do. Thank you to all of the other chaplains out there and their families.
You bet.
One thing we need up here is we need women involved in ministry.
Yeah.
Because, I can't just go and have a lunch with someone's wife or girlfriend to go over things they may be going on.
Yeah.
We need women there so they can support them and, just be sensitive to what God has.
Yeah.
And looking forward to serving together.
All right, perfect. Well, this has been a great conversation with Travis Kahlstorf on Raceway Ministries Today. Raceway Ministries Today, again, is the podcast presentation of the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. And as I indicated earlier, you can get in touch with us at racewayministries.org, or you can look us up on our Facebook page, National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. So as we bring this conversation to a conclusion, I just want to thank everybody for listening and invite you to trust the Lord with all your heart as you move along through the road course of life. And I promise you that God will be a blessing to you, and He'll bring blessings your way as you trust Him. So thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. We hope you'll tune in next time as we continue to explore Christian ministry and outreach in motorsports through the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. If you'd like to learn more about the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, visit our website at racewayministries.org. Follow us on Facebook under the name National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. Check out our podcast and videos found on our National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries YouTube channel. Meanwhile, thanks for joining us for this presentation of Raceway Ministries Today.